All right, so let's go through this, how we make our decisions to choose our rows and choose our pivots and do all that kind of stuff. So setting up the problem, the question that was asked did not really, the student didn't indicate that they needed help on that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with the video paused and then see if you got it right. Okay, so we went ahead and added slack variables to all of our equations. For our objective function, I'm going to go ahead and solve that. So p remains with a positive leading coefficient and everything else has negative. Well, it doesn't have to have negative, but everything else will have negative in this problem. But just the key thing is leave that p so it has a positive leading coefficient. And now we're going to go ahead and fill all this into our matrix. So our variables are x, y, q, r, T, U, P. Okay, my first equation would be 1, 1, 1. Oh, excuse me, I forgot my y's and all that stuff. X, Y, Z, W, V. Then here we go with our slacks. Q, R, T, U, P. Okay, so here we go. Now let's fill all this stuff in. So we're looking at 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. Oops, and we forgot our equal sign. There we go. 4. The next equation would be 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0. Let's see. 0, 0, 4. And our next equation would be 0, 1, try again, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 12. Next equation, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 16. And then for our objective equation, since that's all of our constraints, our objective would be -1, -2, -1. Let's see, there's no W's in that objective, right? There are W's. Oh, it's right there. Z, W. -2. I lost my V. That's what's missing there. Okay. So it should be minus V plus P equals 0. There we go. Okay. -1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0. Okay, great. We got it all set up. All right, this is where I really wanted to start with the problem anyway. The logic. What are we looking for? Okay, for a standard simplex, we're looking for the largest negative number in the objective equation. So therefore, I can either use this column or this column because I have a tie. I'll do y. All right, so we're going to pivot in this column. So now how do I know which to pick as my pivot? Well, what we're checking for is the lowest positive ratio between your equal sign and your y. The reason why you're doing that is, well, what we're thinking of, what we're looking for is the lowest y-intercept. And if you have a y-intercept, that means every other variable is 0. So therefore, x is 0, z is 0, w is 0, v is 0, q is 0, r is 0. They're all zeros except for y and the equal sign. So therefore, what I'm looking at here is y equals 4. The y-intercept is 4. Or the ratio would just be 4 divided by 1 if you were solving it. So now in that column, the next y-intercept would be y over 1. The next column would be 0 over 12. Try again. 12 over 0 or 16 over 0. Well, since that's undefined, we're using 4 over 1, 4 over 1. So again, I have a tie. So I get to pick. Where do I want to pivot? It's got to be in the y column, but it can either be in the first row or the second row. Why don't we just pivot in the second row just for fun? I don't know. You could pick either one. Okay, so now that we've used our positive ratios to find our pivot, we can go ahead and start the problem. I'm pivoting on that number. And what does it mean to pivot? Well, this is just practice from chapter 3.2, I do believe, where we were doing Gauss-Jordan. I use this number to get zeros above and get zeros below. So what I'm going to say is I need to add together to get a 0 in that spot, to get a 0 in my first row, second column. I have to use the number I drew up the box around. I have to use my pivot, and I have to use the number I'm trying to change. So I need to do a negative row 1 and then add it with row, sorry, try again, negative row 2 and add it to row 1. What I'm saying here is it's just elimination technique. What we're just saying is multiply that second equation by negative 1, then add it with row, sorry, I keep saying this wrong. Negative, you're going to do the negative times row 2. So we're going to take this whole row and multiply it by a negative 1, which aka is just y and z. So what we're doing is saying negative y, negative z, negative r, and net equals negative 4. And we're going to add that to the row 1, add that to the first equation. So then we need to do that for everything though. So I didn't need to get a 0 just at that spot. Where else do I need to get a 0? Not just there. I already have a 0 here. I already have a 0 here. I have to get a 0. Whoops. I have to get a 0. That didn't go as planned. I have to get a 0 right there. So therefore, what am I going to do now? Well, I have to use the thing with the box around it. I have to use the pivot. So I have to use that number and the negative 2. So therefore, what would I multiply by? Just elimination technique. What would I multiply by? So that way when I add these things together, I get a 0. Well, it would be 2 row 2's plus row, whatever this is, 5. Okay? So now, when I do this, my row 2 is not going to change. It's going to stay the same because my whole goal was to get zeros above and below. I didn't want to change that number. So to get above, what did we say? We were going to do negative row 2 plus row 1. So negative row 2, so negative 0 plus 1 makes 1. Negative 1 plus 1 makes 0. Negative 1 plus 0 makes negative 1. Negative 0 plus 0 makes 0. Negative 0 plus 0 makes 0. Negative 0 plus 1 makes 1. Negative 1 plus 0 makes negative 1. And we can go ahead and fill those in. Those are all zeros. And then negative 4 plus 4 makes 0. Okay, now going down below, we're not changing this row because it already had zeros there. And the next row we're not changing because it already had zeros there. In that y column. Okay, and then down to the objective equation, down to that bottom row. Okay, what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to say, all right, I needed to do 2 row 2's plus row 5. 2 row 2's, 2 times 0 is 0, plus a negative 1 makes negative 1. 2 times 1 makes 2, plus a negative 2 makes 0. And we will continue this. 2 minus 1 makes 1, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 2, 0, 0, 1, and 2 times 4 makes 8. Okay, so let's recap. What was the decision-making process? How do you go through this? Step 1, look for the largest negative number in the objective equation. We had a tie, so you could pick either column. So now what we're going to say is I decided to pivot in the y column. So now we're going to say to ourselves, how do I know where to pivot? How do I know which number to pick? Well, it's the lowest common ratio where you do the equal sign divided by the value in that column. And you pick the lowest positive ratio because it's the first y-intercept. So therefore, I chose to do the second one. I could have done the first one, first row, that would have been fine. I did the second. So now, how do I know what numbers to pick? Well, the goal is to get every number in this column to be a 0 other than the number you pivoted around. It doesn't have to be a 1. It just can't be, it's just anything. That number can be anything. I just need every other number to be 0. So I say to myself, elimination technique. If I had something like x plus y equals 4 and negative 3x plus 2y equals 7, okay, how would I know what number to pick? How would I know what to multiply by? Well, I'm going to pick something that's easy where I multiply one equation by a number. That way when I add them together, my equations together, one of my variables is eliminated. So right there, that becomes 0x, right? That's all we're doing over here. It's just elimination technique. So we're saying to ourselves, I've got 1y and 1y. So what would I need to multiply by? So when I add them together, they add together to make 0. Well, I have to multiply one of them by negative 1. So that way it becomes the negative. Okay, how did I choose row 2 instead of why didn't I make row 1 the negative? Well, the simple rule of thumb is just always make your negative your pivot. It'll always work out better if you do that. Okay, the reason why is that will keep your answers positive. Notice these are all positive, and that makes our life better because they have to stay positive for us to be able to do this problem. All right, so then we do our pivots. we get our new matrix, and we ask ourselves, do we have any negatives down here in the objective equation? And the answer is yes. So we start the process over again. We look for the largest negative number, which is -2, which means I have to pivot in this column. So now, when I know I'm pivoting this column, the question is which number do I box? Which number do I pivot around? Well, here we go. Check your ratios again. 12 divided by 1 and 16 divided by 1. Now, of course, you could do 0 divided by 0, but that's undefined. And we could do 4 divided by 0, but that's undefined. So, again, we only have two choices. 12 divided by 1 or 16 divided by 1. 12 divided by 1 is smaller, so I'm pivoting off of that number. And we repeat the process. Use that number, use the 1 to get zeros in everywhere else in that column. Well, first row already has a 0, second row already has a 0, the fourth row needs 1. So I need to put a negative in. I need to do negative row 3's plus row 4. And then for my objective equation, it already has a negative. This is a positive, so I just have to say, what do I multiply this by? So when I add this number plus the number I've highlighted here in blue, so I get a 0. Well, that would be 2. 2 times 1, 2 times row 3, add it with row 5 to make a new row 5. All right, and we rinse and repeat. Row 1, not changing. And actually, I'll pause the video while I fill in these. Okay, I just filled in the rows that didn't change. So now we're on to our row 4, where we used this one and this one to make a 0 in the spot. So therefore we just did negative row 3's plus row 4. So therefore I get 0, 0. Okay, negative row 3's plus row 4 will make a -1. -1 plus 1 makes 0. Negative 0 plus 1 makes 1. 0, 0, -1, 1, 0. Okay, -12 plus 16 makes +4. Okay, on to our objective equation. That is 2 times row 3 plus row 5. So 2 times row 3, 2 times 0 makes 0, plus row 5 is -1, 0. 2 times 1 plus is 2, plus 1 makes 3. 2 times 1 plus a -2 makes 0, -1. And we just keep going with this. 2, 0, 1. Okay, 2 times 12 is 24. 24 plus 8 is 32. All right, so there is our next matrix. So now we ask ourselves, rinse and repeat. Are there any negative numbers down here in our objective equation? Why, yes, there is. So we're going to look at pivoting in one of these columns because we have a tie. We have a -1 and a -1. Why don't we pivot in the X just for the fun of it? Okay. So now rinse and repeat. Look in this column and find your lowest positive ratio. So the first x-intercept. Now it's kind of easy to figure out which one we're going to pivot in because there's only one number there. 0 divided by 1. 0 divided by 1 is not undefined. That's 0, which means we can pivot there. That means we can pivot there. Okay, so these rows all already have zeros in it, so all we have to worry about is the objective equation, when all we're going to do is do row 1 plus row 5. Okay, so again, none of these rows are going to change, so it's just, I'll pause the video and fill them all in. Okay, so I've filled in all the rows that didn't change, and now we just got to figure out what is our objective equation. So I'm just adding my row 1 and row 5 together. So row 1 plus row 5 makes 0, 0. -1 plus 3 makes 2, 0. 0 plus -1 makes -1. 1 plus 0 makes 1. -1 plus 2 makes 1. 2, let's see, 0, 1, and then finally, let's see, the row 1 is 0 and 32, it just makes 32. Great. Okay, so you ask yourself once again, do we have any negatives down here in our objective equation? Why, yes, we do. We have one right here. So therefore, look in that column, say there's only one number, so that's where we're going to pivot. It's 4 divided by 1 with positive ratio, so we could do that. So again, first 3 rows not going to change, so all we're going to do here is do row 4 plus row 5. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, fill in everything that didn't change. Okay, so now that we have this, let's go ahead and say, all right, so for this bottom row, what we're doing is row 4 plus row 5. So that would be 0, 0. All right, -1 plus 2 makes 1, 0. -1 plus 1 makes 0, 0. Try again. 0. There we go. 0 plus 1 makes 1. 0 plus 1 makes 1. -1 plus 2 makes 1. 1 plus 0 makes 1, 0, that's supposed to be a 1. 0 plus 1 makes 1, and 32 plus 4 makes 36. So now we ask ourselves, what's left here, down here in our objective equation? All positives, which means we're done. So now it comes to reading your answer. So let's just refresh ourselves. What did our variables mean? If I go back and grab them, it was x, y, z, w, and really we only care about the actual variables. The slack variables don't really mean much to us right now. So our real variables were x, y, z, w, and v. So x, y, z, w, v. These were slack, p, equal sign. Okay, so now when we read our answer, we read it in rows. So for this first row, oh, and then I guess what we should say is anything that has lots of numbers in it except for, so this first column, if you look at the x, there's one singular number and the rest are zeros. Keep it. Y column, one singular number, the rest of them are zeros. Keep it. The z, several numbers, throw it out. We immediately say z equals 0. Okay, keep w, keep v. This next one has lots of numbers, so we would dump it even though it's a slack, 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 because they have lots of numbers in them, or just more than one. P, we're always going to keep p, but it will always end up this way, where it has lots of all zeros except for one number. And then you always keep your equal signs. Okay, so therefore now we can read across our row that I highlighted in yellow, and what is it saying to us? It is just saying x equals, well, x, it's really saying x plus 0y plus 0w plus 0v. So really, we don't really need any of that. What we're really just getting here is x is equal to 0. Perfect. Okay, now for our y's. Y is equal to, when we read this blue row, you'll see what we're left with here is y equals 4. And now for our green row, when we look across here, you can see that got tossed. We're just left with w equals 12. And then for our last row, we're going to end up with v equals 4. So therefore we have the answer of 0, 4, 12, 4. And we have our solution to this system. Oh, and then I almost forgot. P, the objective, the whole goal of this thing. Down here, what is P showing us? P equals 36. So what is this? The original problem said find the max. So what we know is we have a max of 36 at 0, 4, 12, 4. Okay, I hope that gave you whatever you needed.